Just introduce. Hi, Alan. How are you? Yeah. Okay.
Good, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, good. Okay. Before I begin, I just want to discuss one point that I think is pretty interesting in regarding to Hilchos Nedarim, is that to undo a neder, to mater a neder, it's a very easy thing. It's not. I challenge somebody to find a neder that you cannot you cannot find a heter for. In other words, if you the way to come to Bezdin and say, I want to undo a neder that I made, you really have to have sincere regret that you made the neder. But the way we do it is that you can undo a neder with a pesach, and you combine it with a regret. In other words, you come to Bezdin and say that if I would have known that I would regret making this neder, I would have never made this neder. If I would have known later on that I would have regretted making this neder, I would have never made this neder. And that's basically the nusach that we use in Erev Rosh Hashanah to undo everybody's neder. So technically, a person who makes a neder can almost very easily, with three people or with a yachud mumcha, undo the neder. And it's a big chiddush that we require you to have three people to undo your neder. Let's say you have a question in Basar B'Chalav. You don't know if it's kosher or not. You could ask one rabbi and he'd give you the answer. And when it comes to Nedarim, we actually required you to have a Bezdin to sit down at. What's the point of the Bezdin? You could even have your relatives as part of the Bezdin. What's the point of having three people there? But anyway, be that as it may, as strict as it is, there is quite a bit of leniency. And this comes up. Let's say a person made a neder, he wanted to lose weight. So he says, I'm staying off donuts. And he made a neder, he's not going to go into Dunkin' Donuts. So, and a year goes by, he loses 20 pounds. Now he wants to undo the neder. And he can go to Bezdin and say, if I would have known that I would regret making this neder, because you can't say you regretted making the neder helped you lose your weight. But if you would have known that you would regret making this neder, then you can undo this neder by that kind of pesach, something that you just thought of, combined with a regret. That's the way to do it. So it's almost highly unlikely to have a neder that you cannot undo. So it's just for your own information. Anyway, we are beginning Daf Vav. And we're back into the discussion of a machlokes, which we saw on Daf Hey Amid Beis, which was between Abaye and Rava. And it's called Yodayim She'enim Achichas, an intimation, a handle that's ambiguous, that's not so clear. You know, there are certain statements that you make, nobody knows what you're talking about, right? You can say I, and that's not anything. You know, that we don't know what you mean. I am what? That doesn't mean anything. But if you have some indication that we understand what you mean, and it's very clear what you mean, but you didn't say it, so then that's called Yadayim Mechichas. So in a neder, we learned from the pasuk. The pasuk says, I'll repeat the pasuk that we had. Let's just, I think here it is. The pasuk said, almost everything that comes out of your mouth, you have to do. That's what the pasuk says. Almost everything, kechol, means you don't have to say the whole neder. If you said everything but the word aser, like we saw in the Mishnah, mudrani mimcha shani oichelach. If you say those words, I should be avowed to you whatever I'm going to eat. But avowed to you regarding what? You didn't say that it should be aser to eat from you. Still, that's called a yad moichiach. We understand what you mean, even though you didn't say I'm going to be aser, and that's a good neder. The question was, if it's a little bit ambiguous, is it fall under the kol hayotzi mipiv ya'aseh? So we had a machlokes between Abaye says it's still considered yadayim. Abaye was very strict. Even if it's a little bit ambiguous, it's considered yadayim. And Rava says it's not considered yadayim. it's not considered a yad. That was the machlekes between Abaye and Rava. So now we go into the Gemara, a question against Abaye. Meisaveh, I'll ask you a question. The Brisa says, Daf Yomi Aleph, 2 lines from the top. Harei hu alai. A man says, I want him to be on me. Harei ze alai. Or he says, pardon me. He says, Harei ze alai. He says, this should be on me. So, Aser, he says, let's say, he points to a food, I want this to be on me. On me like what? Aser, the Brisa says, Mipnei shu yad l'karbon, because that's very similar to the language that you would use in carbon. When you want to say something should be aser to you like a piece of, like a hegdish meat, so you say, Harei, this should be to me like a piece of carbon hegdish. So if you leave out the word carbon and you said most of the statement, Harei zeh alai, so that is called a yad mechiach. So therefore, only then you become aser on this neder. So taima da amar lai, it's only because you said it should be on me, that there's some obligation, some for this piece of meat to me. Who the aser? Then it becomes aser because it becomes a yad mechiach. But if you didn't say alai, if you didn't say the word alai, so the answer is lie. It would not become also to you because that's called a yad she'eina mechia. It's called a yad that's not so clear. So that's the Gemara's question. The Gemara's question is, so to yufta de Abaye, this will be a refutation according to Abaye. Abaye said that a yadayim she'ena mechichais is considered to be a yadayim. That's enough. All you would have to say is harei zeh, and that according to Abaye, that would be enough. Amalach Abaye, so Abaye will tell you, time da amalai hu da aser. You're right. If he would say a lie, then it's considered a yad, and you would become asa. Aval im amaharei hu, but if you just say this is v'loy amalai, and you didn't say it's on me, so then it's not anything. Why? Because harehu de hefka. It's like you're saying this should be like hefka. Harehu de tzedakah, kamar. That this should be like tzedakah. That's what you're saying. So it's like you're saying it's not even considered a yad. So therefore, by saying harehu, it's not even enough. It's like it's meaningless. And that's what that wouldn't even account to be any type of yad. So it's not even a refutation against Abaye. It's not a yad she'eina mechiach. It's one less than that. It's not even called a yad. So the Gemara asks a question. Yad l'karbon katani. By use the Brisa, let's look at the words of the Brisa. The Brisa says, if you say harehu alai, harei zeh alai asar, because it's a yad l'karbon. Because I know the next word is carbon, right? So it's mashma that it's considered to be a yad. It's considered to be a yad mechiach. But if you didn't say the word alai, it would still be something, but you wouldn't say it's a yad l'karbon. It would still be something, and therefore, according to the Gemara, the way the Gemara's understanding right now is that it should at the very least be something that has to do with Isser. Maybe not necessarily like a carbon, but certainly it's understandable when you say harehu, it's something relating to you. So that's how does Abaye make sense of this brisa? Ella, Ema, you have to say like this. Taima da'ama alai, Abaye is going to learn like this. If you say the word alai, hu aser v'chamere muter. If you said alai, then you're saying the isser of this piece of food is on me, and my friend is permitted to eat from that food. Aval im amaharehu, but if you say this is hegdish. Shneim asurim. They're both asa. The dilma, because there is a possibility harehu hegdish ka'amar. He's saying harehu hegdish. So harehu is already a yad, but it could be harehu hefker, it could be harehu tzedakah, but there's also a possibility of harehu hegdish, which would make it a yadayim she'eina mechichis. You can't definitively say when you just say harehu, what it means. Does it mean hegdish, tzedakah, or hefker? And because you don't definitively have to say it, we go strict and you say that we assume that you may have meant harehu hegdish, and everybody becomes usher. You, your friend, and everybody else. But if you say harehu a lie, then you specifically limited you limited to yourself. And therefore, there's only Isser on yourself, not anybody else. And that's how Abaya will make sense of this brisa. Then the Gemara says like this, Meisvi, I'll ask you a question. Then another brisa, another question against Abaya. A person says, a person is chayav to bring a carbon chatas. Let's say he was Mechal Shabbos. So he says, Harei zu chatas, or Harei zu asham, goes over to an animal and says, this should be a chatas, this should be an asham. So the Gembraisa says, Afal pishu chayav chatas v'asham, even though he is chayav chatas and asham, loy amaklum. He didn't say anything. Why? Because you can't make a chatas as a donation. You could only say that this should be my chatas for an atonement of my sin. Well, he knows he did an aveira, he has to bring an atonement. But he's expressing himself too short. He's saying this is a chatas. So that's why the Brisa says, loy amaklum. That's not good enough. Even though I know you mean chatas, I know you're chayav a chatas, but I'm not connecting the two. Maybe it's somebody else's chatas. So harezu chatasi, harezu ashami. But if you say this should be my chatas and my asham, so im hoya mechuyev, if you're obligated to bring a carbon chatas or carbon asham, devar kayamim, then your words take effect. So this clearly is a refutation against the baya, because by saying harezu chatas, it's really a yadayim she'ena mechichos, because it's not 100% sure we could finish off the end. When you say harezu chatas, it could mean this could be your chatas. It could be somebody else's chatas. Most likely it means your chatas, but it's not, it's a little bit ambiguous. And the Brisa says that's worthless. And according to Abaya, Yadayim Sheina Mechichas should be considered something, should be effective words. Harezu chatas should be enough. So this is a refutation against Abaya. Amalach Abaya said, Hamani Rabbi Yehuda. You're right, that Brisa goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds all over, according to the way Abai is going to learn. Rabbi Yehuda is a Tana who is of the opinion that you always have to have Yadayim Mechichas. It has to be 100% sure I could finish off the sentence. There's no doubt about it what you mean. But if there's some ambiguity to your statement, even though most likely I could say you meant something, what I think you mean, that's not good enough. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And Abai will say that Brisa goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. I myself go according to Rabbanan. So the Gemara said, Abaya, Huda Ama, no da Amri Kifilu Rabbi Yehuda. Abaya, in the previous page, said, I could agree to Rabbi Yehuda, and I could hold that Rabbi Yehuda was limiting his statement of Yadayim Mechichos only by Gittin, not everywhere else, not by Nedarim. Abaya tried to reconcile his viewpoint according to Rabbi Yehuda. And here he seems to say that Rabbi Yehuda, no, is across the board, always holding Yadayim Mechichos. So the Gemara says, Hadabe. Abaya retracted his statement, and he said Rabbi Yehuda is the across-the-board opinion that you always need Yadayim Mechichas. You always need, in order for words to take effect, there has to be clearly, without ambiguity, what you mean. Although you didn't say it, but that's enough. But if it has some slight ambiguity, it wouldn't be effective words. But Abaya is not going with the viewpoint of Rabbi Yehuda. Abaya will go according to Rabbanan. That's the Gemara side. So now Abaya retracted his statement. So the Gemara just asked one last question. Would you say that Rava holds like Rabbi Yehuda? In other words, Rava holds Yadayim she'ein mechichos. If it is ambiguity, it's not considered Yadayim. It has to be Yadayim mechichos. It has to be without ambiguity. Would Rava always be according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Amalach Rava said no. I can go according to the Rabbanim. So why? Now, where's the Rabbanim? So let's just quickly bring it back up. That we had a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanim. If you write on a debt page, you write Harei at muteres l'chalavan. You are permitted to marry anybody. Is that enough of a get? The Chachamim said that is. But what's missing from that piece of paper is that with this piece of paper, you are permitted to go marry somebody. He didn't write that. So Rabbanan said that's pretty good. That's okay. Rabbi Yehuda said, no, you have to be more definitive without ambiguity. This should be to me a document of divorce and a letter of dismissal. So you have to rate this should be a document that allows you to do what you want to do. So Rabbi Yehuda requires you to be more definitive. So would you say, the Gemara's question is, Rabbi is only could view his point according to Rabbi Yehuda? Amalak Rabba will tell you, I could agree according to Rabbanim that by Gittin, Harayat Muteris L'chol Adam is good enough. But Ad Kan Lo Kam Rabbanan Duloy Be'inen Yadayim Achikais. When do Rabbanan say you don't need definitive yads, that you don't need a definitive statement that we can leave no doubt to ambiguity? Elagabe get. Why? Only regarding a get. The Ein Odom Megaris is Eishes Chaver. Nobody will give a get to his friend's wife. When you're giving the get when the guy's giving a get to his wife, just by writing Harayat Muteris L'chol Adam, it's understood everything that goes along with the get, that it's with the paper she can go get married to somebody else. So according to Rabbanan, that's good enough. But in other places in other places in the Torah, for example, Nedarim, so then there's much more ambiguity in there. There's you become Asur, your friend becomes Asur, you both become Asur. So then, in order to have an effective words for a neder, you need a handle, an intimation that's without ambiguity. And that's what Rava's opinion is. New Gemara, and the Gemara is just going to extend two questions of Rav Papa. By Rav Papa, we know when you get married, you have to say, Harayat Mukudeshes Li Kadash Moisav Yisrael. Let's say you didn't say it. Let's say you only said it in a halfway. So the Gemara says, Bayra Papa, Yesh Yad LeKedushin or Loi. Would you say there is Yad LeKedushin or not? There's a half-word statement work for Kedushin, to betroth a woman. Do we say it's like Nedarim, where Yadais work, or Yadais do not work at Nedarim in Kedushin under no circumstances? Do we not learn it out from Nedarim? Maybe it's only a Chiddush by Nedarim, because Nedarim, you need words. Words alone are effective by Nedarim, by a vow. But Kedushin, since the Torah requires you to actually give over a diamond ring, or a ring, or money, or star, so maybe the Torah requires you to be more definitive in your words. It's not enough, of course, giving over a ring. You have to say those words, and you got to say the whole nusach, the whole language of Harayat Mekudeshes Li. So the Gemara explains what Rav Papa's question is. Hey Kadami, what is the scenario of Rav Papa's question? Ilema, would you say the Amalei Isha, a man told a woman, Harayat Mekudeshes Li. He gave two pennies to one woman, and he said, "What you are betrothed to me." And and then he turned to her friend, which was standing right next to that woman, and you also. So the first girl that he gave the two pennies to, the two prutais, has one pruta for herself and one pruta on behalf of a friend. But for the friend, the man did not say Harayat Mukudeshes Li. All he said was Vatname, you also. So that Gemara thought that is considered a yad. Is that a valid kedushin for the second lady? So the Gemara says pshita. Of course that would work. Hayni kedushin atzma. That's the same thing as kedushin. It's like writing Harayat Mekudeshes Li, ditto. So it's, of course that should work. Why shouldn't it work for the friend? Elam. The case is like this. Kagami the Amalal Ishi told the first woman and gave 2 pennies to the first woman. Harayat Mekudeshes Li. You are betrothed to me. Va'amala lechaverta, and she said to her friend, and then he said to the friend, Va'at, you. So he didn't say you also. So now that's a yad. Why? Because I'm reading, and do we say he meant to say Va'at name, you also. So therefore, he meant to say you also mekadeshes amala lechaverta, v'tafse bekedusha lechaverta, and therefore Kedushin will take effect to the friend. Or Dilma, maybe he meant it's Va'at chazai, you are a witness. So there is some ambiguity over here, although not much ambiguity, because he wouldn't want, what does he gain by having the other lady as a witness? But you just observe. But there's a possibility he could have meant you observe. So that's a yad. And it wouldn't work because yadais don't work. So the Gemara doesn't resolve that. The question is, do you apply the din yad by kedushin, just like you apply the din yad by neder, or not? So the Gemara answers, so the Gemara says, Umim b'bayle Rav Papa. First the Gemara asks, did Rav Papa have such a question if yadais work? He seems to think that yadais do work by kedushin. Didn't Rav Papa say to Abaya, Mi saba shmu yadayim shem mechiches havi yadayim? Rav Papa asked Abaya about Shmuel, and he said, did Shmuel actually say that an ambiguous yad is considered a yad? So by kedushin, but by nedarim, Shmuel did not say that. So that was Rav Papa's question. The question was, Rav Papa elsewhere was talking about ambiguous yad. And he's discussing, does it work by kedushin or does it not work by kedushin? Michlal, so from that conversation between Rav Papa and Abaya, we can derive the svira le Rav Papa, the yesh yad kedushin. If it's a definitive yad, it would work for kedushin. The question is only if it's not definitive, if it's ambiguous a little bit, would it work or not? So how could Rav Papa have a question in our Masechta whether yadais work at all, when the Masechta kedushin, Rav Papa is discussing whether Yad Shein Mechiach works by kedushin or not, but you can derive from that Rav Papa held that Yad kedushin would work. Answers the Gemara, yes. In Masechta kedushin, the conversation between Rav Papa and Abaya was regarding what Shmuel holds. Yes, Shmuel will hold Yad work. Will Shmuel go so far to say by kedushin Yad Shein Mechiach would work? And that was the question Rav Papa asked Abaya. If Shmuel holds Yad Shein Mechiach works by kedushin, how come by nedarim it doesn't work? That's Shmuel's definitive. Rav Papa goes even one step backwards and says, how does yadais work? Does it work or not? I'm not sure if it works. Just because you find that yadais work by nedarim because there's an extra pasuk by nedarim of kachol hayotzim mepiv yaso, or you learn l'ad lahazir, doesn't necessarily mean it would work also by kedushin. One last question. By Rav Papa. Rav Papa said, we know that you're supposed to leave the corner of your field as peah. So the Gemara says like this: Yesh yad lepeah or ein yad lepeah? Does handles or intimations work when you're declaring peah, the corner of your field, for the poor, or would it not work? So the Gemara says like this: Hey Chedami, what is the scenario there? Ilema, do you say? You see, when a person is harvesting his field and cutting down the wheat, he's supposed to leave over the corner of his field uncut and say, this is peah. This is where the poor people could come and take their share. So what's the case? Id Amar Hedein Ugi Lehebebeya, this row should be peah. And then he says, oh, by the way, that row should also be peah. So then that's not yadais. Ahi peah ma'al yasi. That is clearly peah. He said this one and that one should be peah. What's the yad over there? He same idea. Going when he said the first one, he said this row should be peah. Then he goes to the second one and he said brahadain and this. And he didn't say this also. He just said and this. Michla. So what's the question? So we're going to just digress for a half a second. How once you yotze the mitzvah peah, right? How could you make another row peah? That's the Gemara's like right away interrupts the question. Can you continuously give your field peah? You could say this row is peah, that row is peah, this row is peah. I thought once you gave one row as peah, you can't make another row peah. Because by making another row peah, you're already taking away the share that belongs to the Levi, the Trumas and Maasros, the Kahanim. So how could I make another row? So the Gemara says yes, and it works. But Tanya, we learned you can make your entire field as peah for poor people. I say it's permitted. The corner of your field, and your field means that you can even make the entire field. So that's the pa'as, it means the corner, or you can make the whole field as payer. Fine. Now, the question was, the man said, this row should be payer. And then for the second row, he said, and this. So what's the question of the Gemara? Me, I'm reading, do you say, kivin the iskish le karbonos? Since there is a hekesh to karbonos, so since peya is compared to karbonos, ma karbonos yesh lam yad, a pei yesh yad. Since by karbonos yadais work, so also peya yadais work. Idilma, or maybe ki iskish. When do we compare peya to karbonos? Is labal ta'acher hu de iskish. When it comes to not delaying. In other words, if you brought a carbon, and if you have a carbon, and you are required to bring that carbon, at least don't let 3 Yom Tovim pass. So same thing with peya. If you declared something, if you have a field and you're supposed to declare peya on that field, you cannot let 3 Yom Tovim pass without declaring which part of the field will be peya. So maybe that's limited hekesh, but not for the fact that Yodais handles, intimations work when you're trying to be makdish a carbon. If you say, hare zis, if you point to this animal, hare zu, whatever, and you didn't say carbon, it's understood you made it hegdish. It works by karbonis. Would it also work by hegdish, by peya, I'm sorry, because there's a hekesh between peya and karbonis. So the Gemara says, Vehecha iskash, where do we compare karbonis to peya? And says the Gemara, the Tanya, we go on one line on Daf Zayin on Mebei Aleph. May imach. It says Ki dorish yidushenu Hashem lekechem imach. Torah says don't delay because Hashem will question you and seek it out from you. And so mi imach from you zeh leket shichem peya, that the Torah is implying leket shichem peya also have the din about ta'acha, don't delay. So since leket shichem peya are compared to karbonos, so therefore maybe yadis also in that way they're compared to karbonos, or not. Would yadis only work by karbonos and not when it comes to peya? So therefore, when a person says this row should be peya, and then he says to the next row and this, and he didn't say this also, he just said and this. So we're not sure what this and this means. So would yadis work or not? The Gemara leaves that unresolved. Okay.